enrich your writing, because for me, this is a really fun workshop. I love the way we can feel each other and words and make things more real when we actually look at how we can think about not just what words do, but what we experience in the world and how we can share it. So let me get started here. So writing isn't really visual. It's not heard really, even when we read aloud. And I think what I mean by that is when we write, when we really are trying to capture something, we're trying not to be heard, but to be felt. We're trying to be all the senses. What we want is to be understood, and understanding is really bigger than just the words. If it were just about ideas, we would put things in syllogisms and logic symbols, and we would leave it there because that would be all we needed. But the fact of the matter is, people are really complicated, and our context is really important to who we are. And the more you can tap into these things, the more you're going to get people to really experience what you want them to. So I want to start with touch because it's my favorite sense. I absolutely love the way that touch is so much bigger than just a texture. It is an effect on people, the way we touch something, the things we feel. And so, for example, for me, sometimes I don't know where my fingers end and someone else begins, whether that's a lover or, you know, feeling my dad's hand as he's getting older, or the softness of baby feet. You know, when you run your hands over that plump ridge of a baby's foot and that untrodden roundness and realize that they haven't really been changed by the ground yet, that one day that ground will shape them over time. But in that moment, a feeling through touch can kind of shimmer and bounce and ricochet back and move through my heart. And suddenly my whole world is a little changed by the ricochet of that feeling. Touch is super important. And when we can add it to our writing, we take someone somewhere. If we can describe what something feels like. And that feeling is the sense of touch, but I think we can also think of how we touch in our skin, how we feel things touch us, you know, the feeling of wind on your face, the feeling of sand mushing between your toes. All of these feelings really add to something. And so for our first exercise, I want to do a 3-minute writing exercise. I'm going to dive right in today. And what I want to do here is I want to spend a minute writing about something. You can decide what's better for you here. We've been together a little bit now. And if you want to do 3 minutes on all of these things together, or if I'm going to give you 1-minute markers and you can switch from these three topics. So I want to write about something safe, the feel of it, something that makes you feel safe. What is its texture? What is its experience? How do you feel it? I want you to write about that. Then I'm going to have you write about something that's cold. Now, it may be good cold, it may be bad cold, but that feeling of cold. And this is very free form. I want you to just feel the feeling and write about it. And then something squishy. Now, if you can find something safe, cold, and squishy, and you want to spend 3 minutes writing about it, or you want to go through those things, that's awesome too. If you want to make it a little simpler on yourself, really focus on safety, cold, or squishy, or even if you want to do a third option and just go, you know what, I like one of those things and 3 minutes is not enough time, you can do that. So find what's comfortable for you. And let's start kind of working through this. I'm gonna start it in just 1 second. Any questions, comments, or feedback before I start the timer? All right,
Sorry,
go.
we're writing how we feel with about something safe, something
How
cold.
how it feels, right? So let's
Gotcha.
say what makes you feel safe is a hug. I want you to write about what a hug feels like, if that's your
Perfect.
thing.
Thank you.
For something cold, it'll be like, what is the texture or feel of cold, or how are you experiencing cold? Is it a cold day? What does it feel like? And write that in whatever way. If you want to just free write it, write it. If you feel more comfortable in fiction and you want to kind of write a story about it, write a story about it. But the more texture you can add to this exercise, that's the point. I want to almost, like, if I could close my eyes and hear or read what you were doing, would I feel what you're feeling? So really dive into that. And if there are no more questions, I'm going to start the timer now. 1 minute mark. That's the 2 minute mark. Five seconds. Okay, and stop. That's 3 minutes. Anybody want to shout out or add to the chat, like how that experience was? I'd love to hear him back. What we hope to get from feeling is that as we think about and write through feeling, we actually get a little more detail about what's important in the moments that we're capturing. And I think that's even good when you're writing something and you want to figure out like what is its impact. Sometimes just describing how it feels to you or by you, like putting your hands on it, can really help us understand like space and create a location. Particularly powerful in fiction, but also really important in things like nonfiction, where you're writing something and you could say like, I was uncomfortable, or you could say, the feeling of the chair was particularly stiff today, or anything that you can do to add a little texture to your writing can make someone see and be in that moment a little more. And that's the point of kind of writing from your senses. So for the next thing I want to do is taste. If we think about taste, it is so deeply connected to memory. Think of those birthday cakes, your mom's favorite dish that she makes you, a meal that's like been ruined by a bad conversation. For whatever reason, people love breaking up or breaking bad news over meals, and I really don't get it. Or when you've been sick, that sickness in your mouth. Taste is so powerful that you'll actually feel nauseated. It's called a Garcia effect by a food that you threw up. You can ruin a food for you. Now, honestly, when you throw up a food, what made you sick was probably before that. It's not the food itself, but we associate it. And that creates a feeling for us, again, of being sick. But there are good things that do that. There can be a taste that you have that makes you think of something you love or a moment that was exciting, a vacation. The taste of a pina colada can make me really feel like I'm in Mexico, even though they're really only in tourist spots, but that's okay. Taste is so powerful that we actually think of taste and people and emotional experiences in terms of taste, metaphorically. We say that someone was sweet or that person was very bitter. The biliousness of something or the grossness, like that was a really gross moment. Well, was it gross? Did it taste gross? The sourness, a sour disposition or someone that was really acidic with their words. We think of those things because taste is so much part of us. And so if we focus on what a taste of something is, we can also communicate it. To that effect, when you like poetry does this pretty well, although honestly, I raked over a lot of poetry for you guys and decided not to plague you with it. Because there's a lot of bad poetry out there. But when you think of like the taste of honey or the taste of fresh fruit or these positive feelings that come up with it. It's hard to say like the taste of birthday cake and have it feel bad. I mean, we like these things so much that we evoke them, often exchanging one sense with another, creating the smell of birthday cake in a hand lotion, for example, which is a weird one, but there it is. Vanilla actually makes people feel warm and cozy. So I want you to think about taste, and we're going to dive into another exercise that's really about capturing and exploring taste for you and how you can fold that into your writing. These exercises really are about focusing, but you can bring that back in when you're writing and when you're doing a revision and try and think of a moment. If someone is in a scene that you're doing eating, think about taste. Or if you're trying to explain a mood, think about taste, how you can evoke it. So for this writing, we're going to spend all 3 minutes on one of two things, or you can go on your own and be rogue on taste. But the first time you tried a food you thought you wouldn't like, I know a lot of people have this experience with sushi and they end up liking it, or they find it with things that they thought were gross as a kid and didn't try, like broccoli, and then they end up loving it. Or a favorite food that someone you love makes. I want you to spend 3 minutes kind of writing about that food, the taste, maybe the texture, or if you feel like talking about a food, like what is the taste of it? If I have never had your mom's famous jambalaya that like takes you to a place, I want you to write about that and really think about how you taste it in your mouth as you're writing about it. All right. So we're gonna start in just 1 second. Any questions? All right, then go. Okay, you have 10 seconds and time. All right. Hopefully, the process of doing this is a really joyous experience. I find like celebrating our senses to be a really joyous moment for us, and we communicate that. Even if we're doing something negative, that aliveness really comes out as we realize we're embodied, and that so much of our world is interpreted not just through our minds, but really through the way that our bodies take in information. So the next sense, I think this one is a super, I imagine it's a little easy for people because we are so motivated by sound. And sound is like a shortcut to human emotion. It's really viscerally recognizable, which means it can impart a certain realness or relatability immediately when you use it to evoke something in your writing. We can create like a sound of sadness. There are certain songs, it's like a minor key and major, I don't know, but that make me sad, that make me cry even when they're happy. And you can make a cello sound sad. Cellos and chamber music always make me cry. So do waltzes for whatever reason. The Beatles, like if you're a Beatle, then your guitar gently weeping, like that sound. And certain words can sound like what they are, an onomatopoeia, right? So like a buzz or a zing or a whap or a pow. Sound can be used to endow something with personality or life. So we talk about things that are animated by sound, the wind howling, how something was shattering to us, or that an idea resonated, or that a sentiment really echoed or rattled us. And the whisper of something to come. All of these things really tap into the fact that the kinds of sounds we experience have a feeling that come with them, that they affect us on a really visceral level. So instead of just saying, that someone said, it's so much more effective to say, they whispered softly, or they struggled to stutter a response. There's something about the way something sounds that really changes what it is. It's something we've lost in a generation of way too much text and email, is the tone of something. They can really change it. And so we want to add that back as we write. And I think this is really important, even in business writing, that we make sure that we're really conscientious of tone. And even just bringing those things together, you can use metaphors, you can use certain concepts. What is it that brings you to a place or a feeling through sound? Sound of waves. We literally put on sleep machines to hear certain sounds of a forest. Um, there's an amazing poem written that was about someone listening to the sound of sirens in urban landscapes, and that is their place, and they sleep really well, and they go to the country, and it was too overwhelming to hear the crickets and to feel the great penetrating sounds of nature, and they just couldn't sleep. We all have that. That's our landscape. And realizing that it's both unique to you and relatable will help you write that for someone else. When you're writing a character, try and think about the sounds that surround them and make up their landscape. So, in doing that, we're going to spend a few minutes writing about, and again, this is the same concept. You can pick one of these, you can go through them, you can blend them together. But a rustling in front of you, something that's rustling in front of you. It could be a bag of chips. It could be a paper bag flying somewhere. It can be anything that rustles. The uncomfortableness of silence. I was listening to one of my favorite Paul Simon songs, "The Sound of Silence." Is actually Simon and Garfunkel, but listening to all the textures that he puts in that song, the poetry of it is absolutely amazing. And it really is about silence and how deafening it can be to not be heard, to not be able to reach someone. And how that feels cold, how it seems bright and loud. There are so many ways that an uncomfortable silence can actually create a sound for you, and to explore that. And then there's also like a sound that makes you curious, whether that's the opening of a door or a leak or some weird sound of bells somewhere that calls to you. I want you to find a sound, and I want you to kind of use these as inspiration into your head to write something, whether it's a vignette, a freeform poem, some prose, whatever is best for you to just write for 3 minutes, and really get into exploring the sound in your writing. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Any questions before we talk about tapping into sound? All right, then I'm going to start the timer now. Okay, and that is time. Sorry, I forgot to give you guys a warning, but hopefully you were okay with that. Any feedback on how sound was to explore? Yeah, well, I'm really hoping that these kinds of things are going to kind of wake us up a little bit. And again, really pull us into thinking a little differently about what we can add to our writing to make it more impactful on a lot more levels. So the next sense is smell. Smell is very keenly linked to memory. I mean, I think we all kind of know that a smell can create a feeling like safety or comfort. It can, the smell of warm bread does that. Other smells like kind of instigate a feeling of alarm, smell of gasoline or fire. We can have a smell that's really disturbing to us. And that can be something personal. It could be something that is really tapped into by our general shared human experience. There's something and probably even cultural for us of what smells feel safe, what smells feel dangerous, what smells are comforting. The smell of a particular person, that moment when you miss someone and you find their sweater or their pillow, and it's just an odd thing. You can't necessarily explain that smell, but that smell is something that hits us really deep. You always know you love a little kid when you can tell their hair is dirty and it kind of gives you a weird feeling. I have the same feeling about my dog. So, they have this weird smell on their paws, but I am so comforted by it. Those things really attach us. There's a moment that's really about smell and taste, and these go together really well in a really famous book called Swan's Way by Marcel Proust, where he talks about going home to his hometown. He's not really sure what he's doing there and what he's exploring, but he sits and he has a cup of tea with a Madeleine, and that bit of tea and this Madeleine take him back to a moment in his childhood when he would have tea with his mother, and he suddenly is in this memory. We do that a lot, and when you can bring smell into something in a writing piece of any sort, it really is powerful. Really difficult to fit in business writing, but if you can, hats off to you. In your personal writing, even in letters or when you're talking to people, because I think a lot of writing helps us develop a way of communicating verbally as well. Bringing those sense of smell in is really powerful. I asked of a colleague once what the experience of having a new child was like, and he said, "She's so wonderful, she smells like marshmallows." And I was like, wow, that is so bizarre. But whether it was marshmallows that made him think of her or the other way around, that was what he kind of epitomized his experience of his brand new daughter as. Using that in your writing can really wake someone up, make them pay attention, and it can also bring them into a place that they feel recognized. So, we're going to explore smell for this next writing exercise. This is going to be 2 minutes each because I think smell is fun. So I'm going to tell you when it's 2 minutes and you're going to switch. The first thing I want you to write about, and it doesn't have to be the topic, it can also just be the context. But I want you to think about the smell after rain. It's actually called petrichor. And that smell, it's like a musty, moldy, wet smell where everything is like kind of in the air and awake. Think about where you are in thinking about that smell. Are you on an urban street? Are you on a beach? Are you somewhere in travel? Where are you? And I want you to write about it or write a character's experience of it or just use it as something to launch you into a memory because that's what smell does. So that's going to be the first one. And the second one, I want you to switch and I want it to be about baked bread, that fresh smell of baked bread. And if it's not bread that gets you excited, something else that is baking or in an oven that has that warm smell that just takes up a space. When I was in Paris for grad school, like I literally could leave my little tiny crappy apartment and smell fresh baked bread every morning, and it made me feel less lonely because I was there by myself. And then finally, like I said, the hair of someone you love. What is there that smell? Bring it into something. I want you to find these little vignettes and these moments and write about them because it sounds simple, but when you can start tapping into that naturally as you write, your writing is going to become incredibly effective. So I'm going to reset the timer now, and I'm going to let you know when 2 minutes is up, and I want you to switch. So this is going to be 6 minutes. It's a long time, but it should go fast. If you feel like you're hitting a writer's block or something, just keep writing. I don't care if you're like, start writing about elephants, just keep going. Pete does this a lot in his workshops, and it's true, just write. So I'm gonna go ahead and start the timer now. Okay, switch to freshly baked bread or some other baked good. All right, final topic, smell of hair. Okay, and stop writing. I'm hoping that you're able to really explore and play with that, and that these are feel good exercises in a lot of ways. Where, wherever you're going, that journey is really helpful, even if it seems like it's not. These practices help us think more on our toes about, kind of how we think through an experience that we want to share. Sight is one that we often see. It's one of our go-tos. We really use vision a lot in our writing. It's really natural to do it because it's words. We're trying to bring people there. So more than any other sense, though, being able to see what's happening really helps us feel that we're aware of what's going on. It really makes us believe something. Seeing is believing for a lot of people. And when we add that into our writing, we're not just making a statement. We're saying this thing is real. And that can honestly be dangerous as well. We can say this is what happened, and someone is not realizing it's being interpreted for them. So in writing, seeing something can be more convincing than just hearing facts. And this is true with all of your senses. These are ways we persuade, and they can be used in any form of persuasive writing. So instead of just saying the girl looks suspicious, where now someone can argue with you because you've just said something like, well, I don't know, was she? You can say something and lead them to that conclusion by simply describing it. Her eyes were darting here and there like two hummingbirds as she bit her nails and squirmed in her chair. Now you're probably feeling that discomfort and feeling a little suspicious of what she's going to do next or what she has done. So you can help convince and create curiosity simply by describing something instead of saying it. You want to let people interpret what they're seeing and feeling through your writing rather than telling them. This is good even in good practice for like movies and other things. When we are brought along on a journey, we're much more convinced of something than if we are straight told. When we learn to write, a lot of times we're taught like, hey, put out a thesis and then argue it and then conclude it. That's actually, first of all, very American. Not everyone writes that way. But secondly, it immediately says to someone, this is my truth. If you disagree with these premises, why bother continuing? You're never going to convince someone. You're only going to ever speak to the people that already want to believe you. But if you want to convince someone of something, whether that's argumentative writing or whether it's business writing or whether it's, you know, your fictional writing, to get them more immersed in what you're saying, you want to bring that visual element to it. You want to describe what's happening, and you want to impart tone in doing that because you're going to bring them along that way. That way, you're not saying, feel this, see this, do this, think this. You're actually saying, here is what it is, and bringing them to what you're constructing as the logical conclusion. So, we're kind of picking things out of a bigger picture to create meaning. And we all do it. We do it every day. So getting to do it consciously in your writing is really going to help you. So for this exercise, I want us to kind of practice a little voyeurism. I actually think it's a really good idea if you want to better your writing all the time. Start watching people, things for the details that make them idiosyncratic. Try picking out what it is. When you see someone, you're like, "Ooh, they're suspicious." Ask why. When you see someone and like, "They're beautiful," think about why. Always ask that why and try and capture it. Because when you can do that, you can then help other people to see through your writing what your truth is. So, voyeurism can be kind of an act of an intrusion, love, alienation. We can look through windows at other people's lives when we're feeling particularly lonely or curious. I used to love doing that in New York. Um, Admit it, maybe it's creepy. Um, it can be something creepy, that we watch someone, can be obsessive. It can be actually an act of love, right? Like your parents watch you like do everything. They're concerned about it. We know the moment someone is curiously silent or not acting the way we normally expect them to act. So I want you to write about someone who doesn't know they're being watched. And you can draw from memory here and talk about someone that you know so well that the little things about them, are what makes them them, you know, or write about someone that's sleeping, whether it's like these pictures of someone sleeping on a park bench with his dog beneath them, or whether it's, someone on the beach or someone, that you care about, or you have insomnia. There's some reason you're watching someone sleep. or someone at tide pool, someone in the midst of that curiosity and exploration. Or maybe they're not connected to that. Want you to think about these moments, a memory of someone that you miss, or the idiosyncrasies generally of someone that like are just kind of unusual and quirky and make them who they are, or make a situation. If you want to combine this, for example, with the dialogue practices we've done before or anything else, feel free to do that. But what I want you to focus on is this voyeuristic moment of capturing someone's essence or who they are based on the things they do or their context or any of the visual elements that bring someone into a moment. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do this. I think it's a really fun exercise. So I hope you think so too. And start. And stop. How is everyone doing out there? Pete, you can still hear me, right? I accidentally turned it off for a minute.
Yes, can.
Okay, great. All right. I know everyone gets so silent. I'm having you do all this work. It's like heavy weightlifting. Um, Hopefully that was fun. Clearly we've gotten through a lot of the senses and you've had a lot of practice. So I'm going to have us do another visual moment. And then I want to do something with the little extra time we have to bring all of this together. So for this one, I want us to imagine a time where we've traveled somewhere. And I want you to write a detailed view of about an inanimate object. I just had you do this voyeuristic thing about someone who is animate. And actually, if you really like that, how about just switching it to animals? Like, if that's your thing, like a specific animal, you can do that. But I want you to write about somewhere that you've traveled or some experience you've had, and really think about a detailed view or an inanimate object that captures your experience of a place. Maybe it was that view from your window that just really woke you up every morning with the sunrise. I was in Cuba a few years ago visiting my grandmother, and we had this particular hotel that I'd wake up and it was just this amazing dawn over Paleolithic looking lush valley that just floored me and just felt like I could melt into that sky and then it would be as big as the sky would be. There are moments that we have that really help us reflect on a place or time. And they could be very small, like a particular tchotchke you had, or, a moment that you saw something, a bug that you experienced that was weird about a place. Who knows? But there's something there. I want you to get that time in your head, and I want you to think about the visual moments that kind of compose it. Like if you had to describe to someone what that place was, I want you to find it in a thing or an animal that's like, yeah, that's it, and describe it. A friend of mine went to India, for example, and when I asked her how was it, she said, I'm really conflicted. I went there for she went there for a month for business, and she was like, it comes down to these emaciated dogs I saw in the street, and I love dogs, and there's just so many, and I feel like everything came down to the fact that I couldn't not see the poverty and how it was affecting the people and animals. And her kind of description of it, her description of the busyness of the place and these things that stuck out in the context really helped me understand how she was being affected. I think you want to do that for someone else. It can be a positive thing or an upsetting thing, but spend 3 minutes just finding a place and explaining this different world to someone through something that you've seen. All right, we're going to start that now. Okay, and time on that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I wanna kind of talk a little bit about something we're gonna do with the last exercise for the last few minutes we have. We have moments where things kind of all come together. Often they happen when they're exceptional moments, even though our everyday moments are full of them, we just don't notice. For example, I'm in town visiting my family for a birthday, and I saw a friend last night who is absolutely delightful. And when I went to hug her, I noticed that even through her jacket, I could feel the bones of her body. I know that she's been going through a hard time, and, as she was saying something, she was talking about how she had just gone through this bad moment. She was in a hospital, and she was watching these little animals that were like lizards, and they do little push-ups, skinks, actually, but, she was talking about how important that was. As I put these things together, I really had a moment that was powerful to me. The feeling of her thinness, the fact that she really needed to be distracted by this little thing that was happening and focusing on. And it was almost like a little story in and of itself. So, for the last few minutes, what I want you to do is think about something that's affected you recently, where there was a feeling to it, a smell, all of these senses. And I want you to try and incorporate all the senses you can into capturing that moment, just with like every sense that you can, just like that moment was something you needed to save and share. So I'm going to do that. We're going to give 2 minutes. It's going to be our last thing. So just, we can do 3 minutes. We have it. Just spend time really falling into that moment and capturing everything you can. It doesn't have to be linear. You can use any method you want, but just try and find something that was impactful to you. And instead of saying what it was directly, describe it in all the ways that you felt it or were affected by it. Use as much of the language that you've been practicing with today and the ways of thinking about it as you can to make something that is really expressive of what it meant to you without saying words that are about meaning. All right. So we're going to start now. Okay, and stop. We're right at time now, and I really hope that you guys got some generative stuff. If you wanna share it with me, I'd love to see it. You can email me, you can send it over chat. If you wanna give me feedback, that would be great. We're probably for the next few series, we're doing gonna focus on content and business writing, change things up. I'm also totally open to things you guys wanna practice or write about. There's so much we can explore. There are a whole lot of other senses in this topic alone that we could actually work